There is a moment, almost every single day, when you are not really making a decision. You think you are. You feel like you're choosing, but you're not. You're reacting. Somebody sends a message, and your thumb moves before your brain even catches up. Someone criticizes you, and your chest tightens before you've had a single conscious thought about it. You open your phone without deciding to. You say something in an argument that you didn't plan to say. And later, much later, when the moment has passed, you sit there wondering, why did I do that? Why did I react like that? That wasn't even me. Except it was you. Just not the version of you that you like to believe is in charge. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people never sit with. Most of what you call yourself is running on autopilot. Your mind has been trained, shaped, and rewired by thousands of tiny moments you never consciously agreed to. And until you notice this, you will keep mistaking your habits for your identity, your impulses for your choices, and your reactions for your character. This is the story of what actually controls your mind, why it happens without your permission, and what it takes to finally take the wheel back. Think about the last time you felt a wave of anxiety wash over you for no clear reason. Maybe you were just sitting there, doing nothing dangerous at all, and suddenly your heart started racing. Have you noticed that your body sometimes seems to know something is wrong before your mind does? That's not a coincidence. That's your amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure buried deep in your brain, doing exactly what it evolved to do. It scans the environment constantly, faster than conscious thought, looking for threats. Thousands of years ago, that threat might have been a predator in the grass. Today, it might be an unread message from your boss, or a slightly cold tone in a text from someone you love. Your amygdala doesn't know the difference. It just knows something feels off, and it hits the alarm before your rational mind is even in the room. This is where it gets interesting, because here's what nobody talks about. Your amygdala isn't trying to sabotage you. It's trying to protect you, using a system that was built for a world that no longer exists. You are walking around with prehistoric wiring plugged into a modern life, and most of your emotional chaos is simply a mismatch between the two. Now imagine a teenager scrolling through social media late at night. She sees a photo of friends at an event she wasn't invited to. In less than a second before she even reads the caption, something in her chest drops. That's not weakness. That's not being too sensitive. That is a very old part of the brain interpreting social exclusion as a survival threat. Because for most of human history, being excluded from the group didn't just hurt your feelings. It could get you killed. Alone on the savannah, without the tribe, you didn't last long. So your brain still treats social rejection with the same intensity it once reserved for physical danger. But that's only part of the story. Because reacting is one thing. The real problem is what happens next, which is repetition. Every time you respond to a trigger in the same way, whether it's checking your phone the moment you feel bored, snapping at someone the moment you feel criticized, or reaching for food the moment you feel stressed, you are not just having a reaction. You are strengthening a pathway. Neurons that fire together wire together. This isn't just a catchy phrase. It's a real principle of how your brain physically changes shape based on repeated behavior. Each time you follow the same emotional reflex, the neural route becomes smoother, faster, more automatic. Eventually, it doesn't feel like a choice anymore. It feels like who you are. This is why so many people say things like, "I've always had a temper," or "I'm just an anxious person," or "I've never been good at focusing." What they're actually describing isn't a fixed identity. It's a well-worn groove in the brain, built one repetition at a time, usually without anyone ever choosing it on purpose. Here's where it becomes fascinating. Your brain has a reward system built around a chemical called dopamine, and dopamine has been badly misunderstood. Most people think of it as the pleasure chemical. It isn't. Dopamine is the anticipation chemical. It spikes not when you get the reward, but right before, in the moment of wanting. That's why checking your phone feels compulsive even when the last 50 notifications were disappointing. Your brain isn't chasing satisfaction. It's chasing the possibility of it. That subtle difference is the entire engine behind addictive behavior, whether it's social media, junk food, or endlessly refreshing an inbox, hoping for good news. Now here's the strange part. This same system that can trap you in mindless scrolling is the exact same system that can build extraordinary discipline if you learn to redirect it. Dopamine isn't your enemy. It's a tool. The question was never whether your brain would seek reward. It always will. The real question is what you train it to associate reward with. Think about someone who used to dread exercise, who could barely finish a short walk without wanting to quit. Fast forward a year, and that same person can't imagine skipping their morning run. They crave it. What changed wasn't willpower alone, it was the wiring. Every time they followed through, their brain quietly recorded that behavior as valuable, until the anticipation shifted from "I get to stop" to "I get to start." That's neuroplasticity, the brain's lifelong capacity to reorganize itself based on experience. You are not stuck with the mind you have right now. You are, in a very real physiological sense, still being built. Every single day. But building a new pattern requires something most people underestimate completely, and that is awareness in the exact moment before the reaction happens. This is where the prefrontal cortex comes in, the part of your brain responsible for planning, reasoning, and impulse control. It sits right behind your forehead, and it is, quite literally, the last part of your brain to fully develop, often not finishing until your mid-20s. It is also the first part of your brain to go offline under stress. That's why, in a heated argument, you can say something cruel that you would never have said if you'd had 5 calm seconds to think first. Your prefrontal cortex, the wise adult in the room, gets shoved aside, and your amygdala, the panicked alarm system, takes the microphone instead. Have you noticed how much clearer your thinking feels after a good night's sleep, or a walk outside, or simply pausing to breathe before responding to something upsetting? That's not a coincidence. Those moments give your prefrontal cortex the chance to come back online. Some psychologists describe this as the difference between the reactive brain and the reflective brain, and the space between a trigger and your response is, quite literally, the only place where freedom exists. Whether or not you've ever put words to that idea before, you have felt it. Every time you managed to pause instead of explode, you were living proof of it. Now, here's something that changes how you should think about self-control. Most people imagine willpower as a muscle they either have or don't have, something that determines whether they're disciplined or weak, but research suggests this framing is misleading. Willpower isn't primarily about raw strength. It's about environment design and pattern interruption. People who seem to have the most self-control usually aren't fighting their impulses harder than everyone else. They've restructured their environment so the impulse doesn't arise as often, or built a habit of noticing the trigger a half second earlier. This might be the most important shift in this entire story. You do not need to become a different person to change your behavior. You need to change what your environment and your attention are quietly training your brain to expect. If your phone sits face up on your desk, your brain registers it as a live possibility every few minutes, and each glance mildly reinforces the checking habit. Move it into another room, and something changes, not because your willpower increased, but because the trigger disappeared. Your brain can't chase what it doesn't see. This is also why identity-based change tends to work better than sheer force. Telling yourself, "I'm trying to check my phone less," keeps you locked in a battle against a habit that still defines you. But telling yourself, "I'm someone who is fully present with people," quietly reshapes how you interpret your own choices. Every time you put the phone down, you're not resisting a craving. You're confirming who you already believe yourself to be. Beliefs about who you are shape behavior far more powerfully than beliefs about what you should do. But wait, there's a deeper layer beneath even this. Because if your brain is this shaped by repetition, by dopamine anticipation, by amygdala threat detection, by whatever pathways you happen to reinforce without noticing, then a strange and slightly unsettling question emerges. Who exactly is doing the controlling? Is there a you separate from all of this wiring, sitting quietly behind it, watching, deciding? Or is the sense of a unified self simply the story your mind tells after the fact, stitching together reactions and impulses into something that feels like a coherent narrator? Cognitive scientists have wrestled with this question for decades, and there isn't one tidy answer. But here's an explanation many psychologists find compelling. The self isn't a fixed thing hiding somewhere inside you, waiting to be discovered. It's something closer to a process, actively constructed moment by moment, largely through attention. What you repeatedly pay attention to becomes what you repeatedly reinforce, and what you reinforce becomes who you experience yourself to be. You are not just living your life. You are sculpting your own mind with every hour of focus you spend. This reframes the entire idea of self-control. It was never really about suppressing some wild, uncontrollable version of yourself. It was about recognizing that the version of yourself doing the suppressing and the version being suppressed are both products of the same process, and that process is trainable. Think about a moment of real personal growth you've experienced, even a small one. Maybe you used to lash out when criticized, and now you're able to pause and actually listen. Maybe you used to spiral in anxious thoughts before a difficult conversation, and now you can name the feeling and let it pass without being swept away by it. Notice that this change didn't happen because a completely different person showed up. It happened because the same brain, given repeated practice, repeated pauses, repeated small choices, quietly rewired itself into something slightly steadier. That is the deeper meaning hiding underneath all of this. You are not fighting your mind as if it were some external enemy holding you hostage. You are in an ongoing relationship with it, one where every act of attention, every repeated behavior, every moment you choose reflection over reaction is a vote for the kind of person you are becoming. Some votes will lose. You will still snap sometimes. You will still scroll longer than you meant to. You will still feel the amygdala fire before the prefrontal cortex catches up. That's not failure. That's simply what it means to have a human brain built by millions of years of survival pressure. Perfection was never the goal. Awareness was. Here's the final perspective worth carrying with you. The next time you feel that familiar tug, the urge to check, to snap, to numb out, to run from discomfort, try not to see it as a battle between your discipline and your weakness. See it instead as a fork and a path you are quietly building, one repetition at a time. The version of you 6 months from now, calmer, sharper, steadier, is not a different person waiting somewhere in the future. It's simply the accumulated result of thousands of these tiny forks, chosen slightly differently than before. And maybe that's the strangest, most hopeful truth in all of psychology. You don't need a dramatic transformation to change your life. You need to notice the half second before the reaction, again and again, until noticing itself becomes the new automatic response. Which raises another question worth sitting with. If your mind can be shaped this quietly, this gradually, by forces you never consciously agreed to, what else has been shaping your beliefs about yourself without your permission? Your sense of confidence, your fear of failure, even the voice in your head that judges you the moment you make a mistake. None of that appeared out of nowhere either. And understanding where that inner voice actually came from might be the next thing worth uncovering.